Okay, let's bounce into the text, everybody. It's great to be able to catch up for a moment. Uh, and now we're going to be diving back into the book of Proverbs. So, Proverbs, as we learned last week, it's wisdom literature. We have different, it's an anthology, again, of anthologies. There's many distinct parts that are all collections from a text or more than one text that are compiled together to create the book of Proverbs. So last week we sort of began with the introduction, sort of the proem to the text that had a very unique style for Proverbs. It was a bit more of poetry. You know, we had these sort of longer segments, more fleshed out ideas. Now this week we have the quick hitters in a way, sort of the catchy, pithy sort of one-liners, two-liners that are meant to help guide us, throughout our lives. This goes on for 13 chapters. I gotta say, I looked through a couple chapters, and after a while, it's a little repetitive. And so, we're not going to go through all of it. There's only so much time you can hear. It's good to learn stuff, sort of. So, but we're going to have some of those ideas in the beginning. And then if we have time, I took some of the other parts of the books of Proverbs to take a look at as well. Similar in theme, but it's different structure. Okay. So we're going to put the text up. And so we should see, hopefully, Proverbs, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Both of us.
Okay. So, as we mentioned last week, it begins, the idea of Proverbs begins with the idea that Solomon wrote the Proverbs in his middle age. So you'll see a couple of times it'll cite Solomon as the author. Though, as we mentioned, that because this text was written by many authors over probably the greatest length of time between when things started being written for this book and when it was compiled, one could probably easily say, 800 years, if not more, in between the time when this book was started, so to speak, to when it was actually finished, when it was compiled. So let's take a look beginning at chapter 10. You see the numbers on the side here. That's actually the verses, so we don't have every verse here because, again, it gets a little bit repetitive as is. So I just took some select parts of it, for us. And we'll take a look and we'll see if we have some thoughts per proverb. This will be one where, like, if it strikes you as interesting, we can sort of maybe talk about why for a minute and see what we get from some of these proverbs. Melissa and Tyler, you are my top screen, so would you like to begin reading?
The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise child brings joy to their father. A dull child is their mother's sorrow. Ill-gotten wealth is of no avail, but righteousness saves from death. Negligent hands cause poverty, but diligent hands enrich.
Okay, let's do one more.
The name of the righteous is invoked in blessing, but the fame of the wicked rots.
There we go. And so you'll see, again, very clear demarcation, the structure of these things, it's very tightly constructed, right? So we forget the first little Proverbs of Solomon part, but you'll see the word but appears often in these things. It's sort of supposed to be a parallel. A wise child brings joy to their father. A dull child is their mother's sorrow, right? So it's the opposites they have here, right? So the wise child versus the dumb child, or the dull child, I'm sorry, the dull child. And joy versus sorrow, and even with the parents, right? Mother and father. So that it's supposed to be sort of poetic. It's supposed to be pithy. You're supposed to be able to remember it, in the English as well as the Hebrew. The English tries to capture a little bit of the Hebrew in terms of trying to make it get more of that parallel, right? I will say, just for complete transparency, I tried to get a lot of them, but I didn't always. Usually it is in the masculine, like a wise son brings, joy, but I try to make it a little more gender neutral. So when you see child or whatever it is, that's my little redaction. That's my little edit, for these texts. Okay, and so a wise child brings joy. Why do they bring joy?
The name will be passed down. Possibly.
Name to be passed down, yeah.
Days.
He brings home A's.
I'll bring some A's from school. That's a lot of shepping nachas, as we used to say back in the day, right? So the idea is, you want to have a son bring pride, bring honor, a child to bring, pride and honor. And that when they're wise, as we mentioned last week, wisdom being seen as a valuable, essential, laudable trait, as Proverbs is going to remind us many times, that wisdom is important. So, the doofus a little less so, right? The dull child, the one who is less interesting, brings problems. Hold on for 1 second. Okay. Having mic issues today. So the dull child, is depressing, is not as interesting. That's what we got so far. Nice way to divide children and to create strife in the home. Okay. You're going to see here a little bit of a hint from Ecclesiastes as well. But the idea here of ill-gotten wealth is of no avail, but righteousness, that's what's important. So, don't be unethical in your dealings. Don't steal. Don't mistreat people. That's the best way of living, is that to live a righteous life. The idea that sin is going to perhaps shorten our lives, whereas righteousness is going to lengthen our days. This is going to become later, as most things, it's going to be given a layer of afterlife is going to be put to this, right? So righteousness, yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, Bob, what's up?
The dull child is their mother's sorrow. Why would it be a mother's sorrow? She might have. There is no sorrow. I don't get that. Why the dull child should be a mother's sorrow?
So the idea being that, you want your child to be wise and want them to be fruitful sort of in the world. And the saying the dull child is not going to be able to bring as much positivity back home. It's not going to excel in the same way, I guess. I think part of it is the adjective, so I'm not sure, about dull as the translation. I've looked at the Hebrew. But the idea being that, you want your kid to be exceptional, right? I think you
want them to be successful.
Successful, in the world, right? And so the wisdom is going to help them be successful. Whereas the one who is dull, they might be using this as dullard, is not going to be as successful. So that's why they're saying that's going to be sorrow. Also, when you think about filial piety and, the idea that, maybe your children will help support you. If the wise one is the one that's successful, they're going to be the one supporting perhaps the parents in their old age, whereas the dull child might be still living on the dole. They might be still on the family bank account. So another probably area of sorrow there. Perhaps. Negligent hands cause poverty. You got to know what you're doing. That's going to be a problem. So it's like when I try to do any kind of home repair, it always brings sorrow and poverty, because I don't know what I'm doing. So, we have to get someone else to do it. Diligent hands enrich. So if you know what you're doing, you're going to be more successful if you're more active. And this one, again, a lot of these don't need a lot of interpretation, to be fair, but I'm just going to, a couple thoughts as they pop up. The idea that righteousness, that is going to be invoked for a blessing, right? So having a good name is seen as very important, obviously. And, if we do good in the world, if we create good, and we're known for being a just and fair person, then people are going to recall us for a blessing. Like when we say, may their memory be for a blessing. And then the idea being here is that the ones who are wicked, they're what's a good word for it? Sort of their deeds, their notoriety eventually sort of fades away. I'm not sure how true that is either, by the way. The last one. We remember the villains sometimes almost as much as the heroes, depending on their deeds. But the idea being that more, I think it's just more again in the eternal sense that it sort of passes away. Okay, Linda Bilo, you want to pick up here with 8?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I scrolled too far. There we go.
The one whose heart is wise accepts command, but the one whose speech is foolish comes to grief. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all faults. The one who follows discipline shows the way to life, but the one who ignores reproof leads astray. When there is much talking, there is no lack of transgressing, but the one who curbs their tongue shows sense.
Okay, excellent. So we have a lot of good little nuggets in there.
Yeah.
The first one, 8. The one whose heart is wise accepts commands, but the one whose speech is foolish comes to grief. Not an exact parallel in the English, but I think the idea here being, right, that if we're wise, we'll be flexible, we'll be open from learning from other people, and we'll do the right thing when we're told, by someone perhaps even wiser than we are, but what the right thing might be. And others who speak Michigas, it's going to be a problem later, right? They're gonna come to grief. There's only so much nonsense one can spread before there isn't a problem. This next one is often paraphrased, at least the second half. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers up all faults. I like that one. That's a nice one, I think, especially, when we think about relationships, right? When there's agitation, when there's discord, then that's going to blow up. That's going to get worse before it gets better, right? When two people are really antagonistic towards each other, it becomes like, like in a blender, it just becomes a big mess. It's really, and it can explode everywhere. But love, when you're in a loving relationship, then you can see past your partner's faults. You can see past their little peccadillos. It doesn't affect you in the same way. But when it's someone who irritates you, the same flaw can be completely infuriating. So I think it just depends on the relationship. There are things that, in our relationships with our family, with our friends, with our partners, that again, like no one's perfect, right? We talk about the idea of people being perfect for each other, and that I talk about this one during my my wedding intakes when I'm talking to couples. I always ask the question. I ask two questions: what do you love about your partner, and what about your partner irritates the living daylights out of you? I always ask both those questions because it's like you're gonna marry a whole person. You're not marrying the idealized, romanticized version of a person. You're marrying them, flaws and all. And so the same person who doesn't wash the dishes or pick up their socks or gets into petty arguments today might not be doing it also in 10 years. And so you have to live with those socks on the floor sometimes, and not kill somebody. You'll have to sort of live with whatever else might be going on. And that's okay in a loving relationship. You overlook it. It's not something that gets you agitated. But if each time your partner did the same thing over and over again, and it always irritates you and it always makes you clenchy and angry, that's not going to be good for the long run. And so you need to have the loving relationship that you can sort of turn the blind eye, to it. Or maybe differently said, not even a blind eye, but you're accepting instead of tolerant of the faults. You don't harp on them. You don't pick at them in the same way. It's my thought at any rate. Anyone have any thoughts on that one?
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes people curbing your tongue might be you're thinking about what you're going to say before you say something. You weigh your words.
Yeah, weighing your words is very important.
Is it worth saying this, or is it worth more to let it pass?
Yeah, there was an episode of a show I was watching, and that was actually one of the plot lines. Was that they compared it to being on a nuclear sub, and that like there's a button you hit to shoot to send off the missile, right? But once that missile is sent, you can't bring it back. And that's the same way in conversation sometimes, that like we might know where to hit somebody. We might know like what we can say that will really have a negative impact. But then it's like, no, don't do that, because once you say it, you can't unsay it. And if you say something really negative and really sort of nasty, it can change a relationship forever. And so this one on 19, when there's much talking, yeah, I mean, you can't do Lashon Hara if you're quiet. That's the whole thing. If you're silent, I should say, right? The more words, the more sin, as they say. Because this
Like that.
yeah, go ahead.
The problem is it's easier to say that than to do it.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's why in Proverbs and many other rabbinic texts, they talk about it so much, because it's so hard to do. If it was easy, they wouldn't have to mention it so often. I always say that, like, of all the commandments, that this is one of the hardest ones to deal with because it's so common. Because I wake up in the morning every morning, and start my day, the whole thing. And I got to tell you, there's really an infinitesimally small chance that I'm going to murder somebody, or that I'm going to worship an idol, or I'm going to, offer a sacrifice to Baal, like whatever it is. But God willing, I can make the whole day without Lashon Hara. Most of us in our lives are not going to commit a lot of these sins. But wicked speech, if we can get through a day without doing something that rabbis classify as Lashon Hara, that's a good day. That's a good day.
Rabbi, I remember once at a children's service, it might have been a Tot Shabbat.
Yeah.
There was a demonstration where feathers are in, right? You know what I'm going to say. You throw those feathers out, those words can't be taken back. They scatter and scatter. And I always loved that analogy.
Yeah, that was Yom Kippur Children's Service last
Yes.
year. Before COVID, pre-COVID.
Mhm.
So I remember, because I asked Danny whether or not I can litter the sanctuary with feathers, and we can clean it up before services start. And said, yeah, it won't be a problem, because I love that story, and it's more fun with the actual visual effects.
Yes.
But exactly right, is that we don't know how far gossip travels. And you're going to see this come up again in Proverbs, just the idea that we have to be mindful, shomer lashon, to shmirat halashon, to guard the tongue. And that's why they say the tongue is an internal organ, and behind teeth and behind lips. So that way there's barriers, but the tongue still gets out anyway, and sometimes says things we shouldn't say. But that's the whole thing, is that there's no lack of transgressing, that it keeps going. And that it's, again, the reason it's mentioned so much is that it's the hardest to do. It's, I think I mentioned before, it's a sociological concept as well. Like, if you have to write a law about something, it's because it's happening. You don't write a law for something that doesn't happen. In most societies, if you write it, it's because you're trying to prevent it from continuing. And so with Lashon Hara, certainly with evil speech and with just gossip and slander and the rest of it, it's there. It's part of the world, right? Just the question is how much. And this one on 17, we get this in Leviticus amongst others, but the idea of being open to constructive criticism, right? That the one who ignores reproof, the one who is told or is corrected, and then says, I don't need to hear your mishigas, whatever it is, then they can go astray. Because you have to be open to hearing words of reproof. That's not a negative thing in Jewish thought, that because we're all not perfect, right? It's seen as a mitzvah that helps guide someone back to the proper path. Sensitive way of doing it, certainly, but it's still important.
There was an example of that on the news tonight.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, one of the senators
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing.
Spoke to one of the other senators about not wearing a mask.
Yes.
And he said, I don't need you to tell me what to do.
Right.
Yes, indeed. I saw that note. I was like thinking about that when I saw the Proverbs quote. Thinking about that today. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, he did not enjoy the reproof.
No.
Right.
That's that it was. Gotta love when that becomes complicated, but that's where we are. Okay, Sharon, you want to pick up here on 20, and
Sure.
we'll go through 26.
Okay. The tongue of a righteous is choice silver, but the mind of the wicked is of little worth. What the wicked plots overtakes them, what the righteous desire is granted. When the storm passes, the wicked man is gone, but the righteous is an everlasting foundation. Like vinegar to the teeth, like smoke to the eyes, is a lazy man to those who send him on a mission.
I wanted to throw that one in there because I just love the imagery of 26, but we'll get to that in a second. So 20 is going to be similar with the idea of guarding the tongue, right? So the tongue of the righteous, that's a precious thing because frankly, it's, not so common. But the mind of the wicked, it doesn't help us. Here again, a little bit more cause and effect, a little bit more about sin and punishment. We see this in the story of Purim. That's what comes to mind here for me, is that the plots of the wicked, they wind up getting overthrown. And the idea of the righteous, they get, things go in their way. They're shown divine favor, let's say. 25 gives us, the idea of, again, the impermanence of the wicked, but I think more so in a way that, so I read this a little bit differently. The idea being that if we are not firmly rooted, with values, with ethics, with some sense of morality, right? Then when things hit the fan, when things are unpleasant, when life challenges us, we're less likely to be able to remain grounded in a way. So when there's tumult, when there's uprising, whatever it might be, the one who is more unethical or immoral is going to have a problem, but the righteous those people are going to be, those are going to remain. They're going to have the character to get through it. That's a different interpretation, perhaps, than the intention, but I like it as an interpretation. Because a lot of wicked and righteous, a lot of conversation doesn't always resonate so much. But I love this quote over here on 26. Like vinegar to the teeth, like smoke to the eyes, is the lazy person to those who send them on a mission. Just fantastic. So what's it saying there?
He's not achieving what he's sent out to do.
Yeah, and he's no help, right? And not only no help, because no help is actually different. He's an irritant.
It's an irritant. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's irritating. It's unpleasant, right? When you task someone with something and say, here, if I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and they go, okay, and then you come back later and nothing happens, and you were counting on it, you were hoping for it, it was something that might have been necessary, and now it ain't done. And so you just sort of like, not only do you not have it, but one can be a little bit aggrieved, that it hasn't happened. Is it the worst thing in the world? Always? Not necessarily, but it's irritating. Like smoke in the eyes or vinegar to the teeth. I don't know what kind of vinegar it is, but it's unpleasant. They sort of talk about the idea of, like wine as opposed to vinegar. Like with the vinegar being very sour, and the wine being sweeter. Little Manischewitz. That's better than a big old bowl of vinegar, right? So it's irritating. It's unpleasant, and so when you ask someone to do something, you hope they actually get it done. Make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at these next couple. Bonnie, you want to take that over here? The fear of the eternal.
Fear of the eternal prolongs life, while the years of the wicked will be shortened. The righteous can look forward to joy, but the hope of the wicked is doomed.
Yeah, Basically, it's, similar things, right? I used fear here again pretty intentionally because I feel like the author of Proverbs again probably meant fear, whereas we would likely more translate as reverence, or awe. You can use any of them, and they're basically interchangeable with the Hebrew, but how we translate it matters. It makes a difference to us because those words are all different, and fear has different implication than reverence and awe. But I would say that the author here, I'm guessing, meant more, don't do the wrong thing or you're gonna get zetzed. I think that's what the author was going for with this. Whereas if you're doing the wrong thing, that's going to be it for you, right? So, and the same with 28. It goes together, right? That if you're doing the right thing, you can optimistically look to the future. But if you're not doing the right thing,
Rabbi,
yeah,
that's interesting because we always it's always a saying, "Oh, he was so good," and the bad guy still lives.
yeah,
Yeah. So this is not really shortened. It feels like it is lengthened.
Yeah, I think that's sort of sometimes the issues with these, and which is why the rabbis have to add in later on interpretation. It talks about afterlife and talk about other things, because that way it helps makes these make a little bit more sense. Because you can have somebody who perhaps isn't acting the right way, and all of a sudden, they are succeeding, right, and they're doing well for a very long time. And so that can, and so they say, well, God's letting them get all the good stuff now, but in the end it's not going to end well, in the afterlife.
I was a little bit confused. I missed last week's class because we had a condo meeting. I wanted to know when you talked about the afterlife about 2 weeks ago. So do Reform Jews believe in an afterlife, or is that something that was later on? I don't understand that.
Yeah, so just the general comment on afterlife is that Judaism holds many positions on the afterlife. There's no one uniform position on what Jews believe when it comes to the afterlife, because it can be many things. So in the Reform movement, it's not something that we emphasize very much. It's not something that we really talk about or preach about as much, because it's such a matter of personal, faith of what we believe happens afterwards. I think the most you get in the Reform movement is a very I'll call it a vague comment, a vague conception that the soul, whatever the soul is eternal, right? And so we have some part of us that lives on. The idea that we have a corporeal, presence, our body, our physicality, and that is what is mortal, and that's what passes away, and that's what, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That's what happens to the body. But that the soul itself, whatever is in us, that is, God given, as like God's breath sort of inside us, whatever that is, lives on in some way. And it's what comes after that part, I think, where there is question. Does the soul live on, meaning that we are just part of it all? We are, the Hindus say, Tatvamasi, thou art that, that we sort of, go into the greater mix of what the world is. We're just part of everything. Is it something more like reincarnation? We have that too as a concept in mystical Judaism and Kabbalah in particular. You have reincarnation. Is it a higher level of conscious connectivity with God in some way? Is it some sort of clinging to God? Or is it a conscious heaven? Are we up there, sort of like as ourselves? And hey, Bill, hey, Frank, we can sort of go around heaven talking to each other, hopping from cloud to cloud, eating at the Divine Burns Steakhouse. So it's like that's, maybe, I don't know. You know, and that's the whole issue of the afterlife. We really just don't know. But there are many options, because Judaism does not say one thing about the afterlife. It says many things about the afterlife. Or maybe it's nothing, right? Maybe it's just game over when it happens, you know, and then that's just it. We played our turn, however long that turn lasts, you know, while we're on Earth. And then eventually just, that's it, you know, on to the next thing.
So I kind of have to think about all of that, how I would respond to somebody that was not Jewish, that does believe in an afterlife, how I would respond to them.
Say you live your life the best you can over here, and let the chips fall where they may afterwards.
That's the way I would
good.
like to respond.
Basically,
Thank you.
it just, you know, we'll find out when it happens.
That's how I would like to respond.
No
right.
use stressing about it now, because we ain't gonna know until someone comes back to tell us. We ain't gonna know, so we might as well just enjoy the ride while we have it.
All right, thank you for your answer.
No, of course, I try. It's a fascinating topic. I mean, there's a lot
is.
of good study to go with it. Bonnie, I think I gave you the short shrift. You want to read these next two?
All scales are an abnegation to the eternal. An honest weight pleases God. When arrogance appears, disgrace follows, but wisdom is with those who are unassuming.
Okay, I like that. So we have a different tack now. We're in a different chapter, and it just starts off a little bit differently, right? We're talking about economic justice, right? We're talking about not cheating each other. So false scales, right? False measures, false weights. That's an abomination to God. We can't cheat people. In the holiness code, there's a whole little part about it, about the idea that we have to keep accurate, we have to keep correct weights. And it's seen as a really bad wrongdoing to, you know, slide your thumb on the scale a little bit and to give it improper weight. So that's that first one. And then this is an interesting one to me, because like arrogance, the idea of arrogance, that if we're so full of ourselves, it's not our book, but you know, the pride goeth before the fall still works, even if it's not our book. So we have that idea, but wisdom is with the unassuming. I don't know.
Just give me all of it.
Rabbi, going back to that first one,
Yeah.
could it also be like truth versus lying or something like that?
Yes.
Not just scales or something, but
Yes. I think that one can view this text as a greater injunction towards honesty. And what does it mean to live an ethical life? And so here they're giving a very specific example, but I think certainly one can extrapolate out from this about the importance of being honest in all of our dealings, business or otherwise. 100%.
well, the first thing that came to my mind with all the phone calls we get about getting false information from our computers. And I know everyone has gotten these phone calls, but we're getting strange signals from your computer, from your internet.
Yeah. Yeah, I get those too.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets to the point now, and it's funny because I was joking with someone about this recently. I had, it's a couple hours ago actually, I had called someone up to wish them happy birthday. And my number, you know, I still have my New York cell. And so it's a 646 area code. And I gotta say, 50% of the time I go to voicemail. Like people do not pick up the phone when I call them because it's not a 727 or an 813, and they're not expecting a 646 number. And so I just go to voicemail because they think I'm a scam. They think I'm some sort of, you know, like whatever it might be coming from somewhere else. And I don't blame them, because when I get a call on my phone and I see a 646 number, I let it go to voicemail. I can't say anything. I do the exact same thing. I screen all the time. I honestly do. I have, I would say, at least 35, maybe 40% of the synagogue in my phone already. I try to enter in people's numbers all the time into my phone. That way I'll just have them. That way I know if someone has a weird number or a cell and they call, I'll know it's actually a congregant or someone from the community. But if I don't have the number in my phone and I see a weird area code pop up, I'm not picking it up. It's
My
never
phone won't
good.
answer it. It doesn't answer at all if it doesn't know the number.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it doesn't ring. It says silent call.
Oh, yeah, I don't have that feature. That's a good feature.
It is. It's great.
Yeah, but I'll look at my phone, I'll go, nope. And, you know, and every once in a blue moon, I'll pick it up, and it's always like, call us back with your social security number. Your car's warranty, that we don't know what it is, but it also needs your social security number. Or whatever. It's like all this stuff that comes up. And literally every day, I get like 3 of them. I mean.
Okay, well, I'll pass on to you. I was talking to my trainer about it, and I was telling him about it. He said, I get those calls all the time. And I got one, and the guy went on and on. I finally said to him, I'm so glad you called me. I wanted to talk to you about Jesus. And the phone was hung up.
Oh, God, that's great.
Carolyn, that's great.
I love it.
I got to remember that one.
Yeah. There's always like these moments, and it frankly is scary because it is very easy to get taken in by it, and like you can be very unsuspecting, and it'll sound official, it'll feel official, and then you just have to just like you got to really listen for it, and then you can maybe hear where it's askew. But if they get you on the wrong day,
I've had to tell some of my friends who are older, it's only a voice on the phone. You can't see them. They can tell you anything they want. But I said, never give any information. Never. And but they sounded, I said, I don't care what they sound like. It's only a voice. You don't know who it is. And say nothing.
actually,
And I have been accused of being cynical. But what else do you do to protect yourself?
you got to be a little cynical. Actually, I saw something recently about a new problem. Well, it was always a problem, but it's getting to be worse now because of COVID. Is that people on Facebook are playing all these games, getting sucked into these games about like fill in the blank about your information and whatever it is, and those can be used to scam you. Because you're giving out your personal information. What's the make of your first car?
Yeah.
You know, what's, whatever. This is always like some little questions. It's a fun game and whatever it is. But then people who look at it, especially, because Facebook and data collection, that's a whole other thing. But just the idea being that you give out your mother's maiden name, your car, make and model and whatever else it is, all of a sudden things that can be used to identify you and maybe even guess your password for certain things, you might be just giving that away for free. So there's a lot of ways to have a problem. So it's got to be really vigilant with it. My goodness. Okay. Gotta go off the grid. No, not really. I love the grid. But I will say I use social media a lot less than I used to. I used to use it a lot more, and now it's like once in a while. If you have me on Facebook, like for my personal account, once every 2 weeks you'll see a picture of my kid, one of my kids. Like that's basically about it, that you get from me on Facebook at this point.
That kid, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. Even a little, like Elizabeth won't even do that. My wife won't even do that on Facebook as much. So that's what it is. Okay, let's keep going a little bit here. Gary, you want to pick up here the impious one? Okay.
The impious one destroys their neighbor through speech, but through their knowledge, the righteous are rescued. 12. One who speaks contemptuously of their fellow is devoid of sense. A prudent individual keeps their peace. A base fellow gives away secrets, but a trustworthy soul keeps a confidence. And last, for want of strategy, an army falls, but victory comes with much planning.
Very nice. The one that jumps out at me here, actually, one thing I'll mention is that sometimes I look at these things and I think that it's telling us not only to behave, how to behave, but also to be mindful of what traits to look for in others, you know, because who we trust, who we divulge information to, as we were just mentioning, you know, that matters as well. So, like, these are some good traits that we should look for in our fellows, you know, people who are able to, you know, keep their peace, you know, a prudent person, to be careful about who you tell your, you know, your secrets to. So I think that's, you know, implied in here also about, again, who do we enter into relationship with? Because who hasn't gotten burned by somebody, you know, who you think, you know, you can trust, and all of a sudden it turns out not so much. You know, it doesn't work out so well. So I think they're trying to tell you, just be careful about who you let into the inner sanctum as well. But this last one, I love this one because, again, it's very straightforward, but very applicable, as a lot of this is. A little planning isn't the worst thing. A little organization, right? You can have a good army, but if you're all just maniacs running around like chickens with their heads cut off, you know, you ain't gonna win. But you have some planning, you have some goal setting, you have some ideas, then you're gonna be more successful. I think that applies to a lot of areas in life, right? That we can plan, we can strategize, we can think about you know, the future. Then that'll lead to much more success than just randomness.
Rabbi, on 12, that one reminds me of, I once worked in human services,
Yeah.
and we had a discussion about having to take somebody, you know, aside and, you know, ripping, and they got started out, you know, really telling them off for something they did. And I said, you never do that. And I said, well, they got to be told. And I said, yeah, people can be told they've done something, but you pull them aside, not in front of other people, and you speak to them and you do it in a calm way and tell them what they've done. I said, because the moment you humiliate them in front of other people, you've lost their help probably forever.
Yeah.
You will never recover that relationship. So you have to be careful of what you say to people and how and when you say it.
Yeah.
Gary, going right along with that one, the first things I learned when I was in the College of Education was praise in public, punish in private.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even punish, you know, if you do something in the right way, you tell somebody you've done something that was wrong or bad. If you can do it in such a way to correct it without humiliating them or somehow lessening them, they learn from it. But if you just want to destroy them, then you've lost them, and there's no chance oftentimes of bringing them back in.
Yeah, you can really destroy a relationship. That's why this idea, and there can't be enough sessions on it. I'll put it that way, because it's so important. Is how to give feedback, how to give constructive criticism, how to rebuke someone. That's the word they use in English for it. But how to do it in such a way that is not hurtful and not harmful and not humiliating. Because again, it's a mitzvah to help get someone back on the right track, but it's not a mitzvah to, you know, because then it gets to the Lashon Hara. If you're going to, I think you use the word again, humiliate, embarrass, like almost degrade them in front of other people. That's not going to be positive. It's not positive for the person who hears it. It's not positive for the one who says it, and it's not positive to the audience, you know, that's around. It hurts everybody in the situation. It's negative for everybody. It's not good.
Marilyn or anybody else that was teachers, one of the things we were supposed to do at parent-teacher conferences, if we had a rotten kid in the class that wanted to straggle, we were supposed to start off with something positively, find something nice about the child.
That's right.
And then
I think it was called, they would tell you to sandwich.
Yeah, that's what's coming to my mind. I
Right?
can't remember the first word, right? Because it was like the compliment sandwich, the feedback sandwich, whatever it was. And I was actually at a session recently, you know, a teaching session, where they said to not do that. That is actually, you know, shown to be less effective when it comes to the actual critique part of it, because then people hear the positives on both ends of it and they skip over the negative in the middle and they don't correct the problem. They say it's actually almost like a dishonest way of trying to critique somebody, because you're trying to like cushion and soften it in such a way that the message then might not even be heard. So it's interesting. 'Cause I had also sort of, and I do like the sandwich. I think that's actually beneficial. But I was at a conference, they were like, no, don't do that. It's not, so you got to keep it almost separate. The positives, you have to make sure to have the positives in other places. That's what they were saying, is to make sure to be as effusive, if not more effusive, with your praise, than sort of the critiques, because that way, they'll know that it's coming from a good place and you aren't only picking on them for what they do wrong. That when they do the right things, you got to make sure you're, over the moon for it, and so effusive. But then when it's negative, you gotta, again, not in a mean way, but you have to be direct and not try to hide it or mask it. So it's interesting, because that's what I was thinking about with Gary's comment about, how we give feedback, right? Because, is there ever a time, and I don't know what the answer is, but is there ever a time when you need to call someone out publicly? Because is it ever something that is appropriate? If somehow is there ever a moment when the greater good is served, in saying something publicly?
That might just be a real exceptional event.
Yeah, as I'm saying, I mean, maybe it doesn't exist. I don't know, but I remember that it was a philosophical discussion once about that idea that sometimes, like, are there moments where public rebuke is called for? Are people going to think? So,
Well, if you're seeing something unjust or anything that seems totally wrong to you, I think sometimes you should speak up publicly.
So here's an example. So let's say we're in a non-COVID world, right? And we're together in a group and we're having a discussion, and somebody in the discussion starts saying things that are unquestionably inappropriate, sort of dropping epithets, just really just like, racist stuff, homophobic stuff, whatever it might be, but there's some really noxious stuff. Do you not correct that person in that moment, or do you take them? Because if you wait until afterwards, take them aside, they might. And let's say I'm in the group, right? And let's say the rabbi didn't say anything. The rabbi listened to all this filth, didn't say anything. So then, do I become almost complicit in it in a way? And people will say, well, the rabbi was fine with it. This terrible sort of talk. Whereas they don't know that 15 minutes, later after the class, I might take them aside and say, hey, you can't do that. That's, not appropriate. And so there's a very fine line there, because I think, again, that public, there's been fantastic articles written over the past X number of years, right? On, because you see this stuff online a lot, like this of public shaming. And it's like, that's not good. I think one can say, but there's some people who really believe in it. I don't think it's a very Jewish thing.
No.
But you see these people are very proud of it, and it's like, ugh, I don't care for it. That's my unbiased opinion. I don't care for it. I look at these things and I go, you got to be nuts. I mean, but again, that's just me. And again, I'm sure, like anything else, there might be an exception to the rule, but it worries me. I feel like the continued degradation of manners and civility. Okay, on that cheery note, Debbie Siegel, you want to read a little bit? Can you see the screen?
I can't. Is the screen smaller this time?
I don't think so. I usually have a pretty similar font as
what is your setting, Debbie?
Oh, I don't ask me about.
Don't ask Debbie.
We'll be here all night. I will go. One gives generously and ends with more. Another. Oh, boy, I think I better put my glasses on.
It's small. It is small.
It is small. Okay.
Yeah.
The cataract surgery was supposed to cure this. Okay. One gives generously and ends with more. Another stints on doing the right thing and incurs a loss.
Yeah, well, you
A
want to do one more?
generous person enjoys prosperity. A generous person enjoys prosperity. One who satisfies others shall themselves be sated.
Okay. One thing I will mention vis-a-vis the screen, not to confuse everybody on this, but I do like to mention it, is that on top of your screen you should see something where it says like you are viewing, Temple B'nai Israel's screen, I think, or whatever it might be, and right next to that should
View
be something that says View Options, and that's where you can toggle your view a little bit. So what I like to do, when someone is sharing a screen with me, because I can't do it on mine, but when someone's sharing a screen with me, I like to toggle to side-by-side option. I like that view the best, because then I can use my mouse and I can pull and push the different options, right? So I can make the screen that's being shared as big as I want it to be, or I can maximize my view of who's on the call.
I just did that and it works. Yes,
Yeah.
much better.
And
How
by
did
the
you
way,
do that? What did
it,
you do?
it took me like 5 months to learn that as an option.
Yeah,
So,
it works good.
Yeah, I'm still learning new things on Zoom, and plus they keep upgrading it and changing it on me, which is helpful, but it also means you have to learn new settings. Um,
Make it bigger, Rabbi?
What?
A little larger?
I can't. So that's the whole thing. I can't change your view. All I can do is I can toggle my screen, but I can't toggle your screen.
When I went into view option, like Rabbi said, I went to side-by-side mode and everything got bigger.
That's side-by-side mode. It's not big. It's okay. I can see it.
Yeah. That's the one thing that I keep on trying to figure out, is that you can't change someone else's view. I can only change it how it looks on mine, with the exception of, I can spotlight, people. And then if you're not on gallery mode, if you're on speaker view, you'll see them a little more. But if you're on gallery view, this is turning into a Zoom tutorial. If you're on gallery view, then again, you're going to get a different view. And it was frustrating because we were trying to work on that for the holidays and other things, trying to figure out how to, figure it out with Zoom. It's a good time. Okay, so we have some of this tzedakah related stuff here, right? And I like it. It's a little trite, but it's a nice idea, right? That if you give, you get, right? The idea that if you're generous, it comes back to you in the end, maybe even more so. Whereas other people who don't do the right thing, and then they wind up losing, even more than if they had done the right thing. And the same thing with the second one. A generous person enjoys prosperity, but the one who only looks to their own needs, they're not going to be satisfied. They're not going to be satisfied with it. Okay. We got like 2 minutes to go here. And so I will say that there's just a lot of fascinating passages in Proverbs. This is one of those things. By the way, see, we didn't make it to any of the ones that are sexist. A capable wife is a crown for her husband, but an incompetent one is like rot in his bones. I will say, and obviously, we know what times these are written in, and that there are many very nice things the Bible has to say about issues relating to spouses and gender, and sometimes not so much. Sometimes it's a little bit rougher material, as we know. We just have to take into account the time that it was written. And so one can easily just substitute and just say capable spouse, whatever it is, instead of making it gender. Okay. I believe. Okay, so again, so here you get a lot more about speech. This is actually one that I used 2 weeks ago with my confirmation class, the kids. about anxiety, right? So if there's anxiety in your mind, let it be quashed. But how do you do that? Not always the easiest thing, right? But the idea is finding joy, right? And so the more we can find joy in our lives, the happier we're going to be. And then
Tell a joke. Tell a joke.
Tell a joke. No, exactly right. By the way, if I said it before and I'll say it again, pandemic time for me, I'm gonna say I learned how to use my air fryer. I learned to mix a drink or two at home, and I watched a lot of comedy on Netflix because it's we need to laugh during this stuff. It's stressful enough as it is. It isn't the time for weighty, heavy dramas. It's time to watch your favorite comedians. Okay, so with that said, I have to bounce off because in about 1 minute we're doing Adult B'nai Mitzvah. So we're on. So for those of you who are on the Adult B'nai Mitzvah stuff, you should have gotten an email from me a couple hours ago with a different link. We have to switch to that link. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
I have to
Bye
end,
bye.
leave meeting, and go on again.